Chapter 13 of Ozma of Oz by L. Frank Baum. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Phil Chenevert. The Nome King Laughs. In a moment the king returned to his throne and relighted his pipe, and the rest of the little band of adventurers settled themselves for another long wait. They were greatly disheartened by the failure of their girl ruler, and the knowledge that she was now an ornament in the Nome King's palace, a dreadful, creepy place in spite of all its magnificence. Without their little leader they did not know what to do next, and each one, down to the trembling private of the army, began to fear he would soon be more ornamental than useful. Suddenly the Nome King began laughing. "Ho, ho, ho, hee, hee, ho, ho, ho!" "What's happened?" asked the Scarecrow.
"Why, your friend the Tin Woodman has become the funniest thing you can imagine," replied the king, wiping the tears of merriment from his eyes. "No one would ever believe he could make such an amusing ornament. Next."
They gazed at each other with sinking hearts. One of the generals began to weep dolefully. "What are you crying for?" asked the Scarecrow, indignant at such a display of weakness.
"He owed me 6 weeks' back pay," said the general, "and I hate to lose him."
"Then you shall go and find him," declared the Scarecrow. "Me?" cried the general, greatly alarmed. "Certainly. It is your duty to follow your commander. March!" "I won't," said the general. "I'd like to, of course, but I just simply won't." The Scarecrow looked inquiringly at the Nome King.
"Never mind," said the jolly monarch. "If he doesn't care to enter the palace and make his guesses, I'll throw him into one of my fiery furnaces."
"I'll go. Of course I'm going," yelled the general, as quick as scat. "Where's the entrance? Where is it? Let me go at once." So the Nome King escorted him into the palace, and again returned to await the result. What the general did no one can tell, but it was not long before the king called for the next victim, and a colonel was forced to try his fortune. Thus, one after another, all of the 26 officers filed into the palace and made their guesses, and became ornaments. Meanwhile the king ordered refreshments to be served to those waiting, and at his command a rudely shaped gnome entered, bearing a tray. This gnome was not unlike the others that Dorothy had seen, but he wore a heavy gold chain around his neck to show that he was the chief steward of the Nome King, and he assumed an air of much importance and even told his Majesty not to eat too much cake late at night or he would be ill. Dorothy, however, was hungry, and she was not afraid of being ill, so she ate several cakes and found them good. And also she drank a cup of excellent coffee made of a richly flavored clay, browned in the furnaces and then ground fine, and found it most refreshing and not at all muddy. Of all the party which had started upon this adventure, the little Kansas girl was now left alone with the Scarecrow, Tik-Tok, and the private for counselors and companions. Of course the Cowardly Lion and the Hungry Tiger were still there, but they, having also eaten some of the cakes, had gone to sleep at one side of the cave, while upon the other side stood the Sawhorse, motionless and silent, as became a mere thing of wood. Billina had quietly walked around and picked up the crumbs of cake which had been scattered, and now, as it was long after bedtime, she tried to find some dark place in which to go to sleep. Presently the hen espied a hollow underneath the king's rocky throne and crept into it unnoticed. She could still hear the chattering of those around her, but it was almost dark underneath the throne, so that soon she had fallen fast asleep.
"Next!"
called the king, and the private, whose turn it was to enter the fatal palace, shook hands with Dorothy and the Scarecrow and bade them a sorrowful good-bye, and passed through the rocky portal. They waited a long time, for the private was in no hurry to become an ornament, and made his guesses very slowly. The Nome King, who seemed to know by some magical power all that took place in his beautiful rooms of his palace, grew impatient finally and declared he would sit up no longer.
"I love ornaments," said he, "but I can wait until tomorrow to get more of them. So as soon as that stupid private is transformed, we will all go to bed and leave the job to be finished in the morning."
"Is it so very late?" asked Dorothy.
"Why, it is after midnight," said the King, "and that strikes me as being late enough. There is neither night nor day in my kingdom, because it is under the earth's surface, where the sun does not shine. But we have to sleep just the same as the upstairs people do, and for my part I'm going to bed in a few minutes."
Indeed, it was not long after this that the private made his last